Well, the situation in the ACC is getting very complicated and fairly hostile pretty quickly here as the ACC meets this week. Here's the rundown. We have reports on Monday now that 7 schools from the ACC are meeting on their own with lawyers to try and figure out just how ironclad the grant of rights is in the league, aka they are trying to get out. Well, everybody has been focused on the Pac-12. Here comes the ACC with a lot of drama of their own. Welcome into the YouTube channel. I am John Kurtz. Here on this channel, I talk college football, conference realignment, and college basketball from a Big 12 slant. Please consider subscribing if you have not, and make sure you click that bell to know when it is that I'm going live, typically Wednesdays and Sundays, and dropping content like this throughout the week. Man, it was a heck of a day on Monday after a little bit of foreshadowing on the live show Sunday because of the war chant story about what's going on in the ACC in Florida State, Miami, Clemson, etc., demanding unequal revenue sharing. It now is starting to seep out into the mainstream. Okay, so we're going to read from a couple of stories here today, starting with Sports Illustrated. Ross Dellinger was the first to really hit the scene with one of the Bombshell reports. Now, he had information about the Big 12 and the Pac-12 as well. I'll save that and tuck it away for the next live show because the centerpiece of this really is what is going on with the ACC. So the story starts, this week in Amelia Island, administrators from the ACC gathered for their own spring meetings. More frank discussions are expected about the growing revenue gap between it and the SEC/Big Ten. Handcuffed by an ESPN broadcasting contract and grant of rights that extends another 13 years, ACC schools could find themselves more than $30 million behind the SEC and Big Ten. Okay, we know this. This has been a part of the problem. The ACC is in a really, really bad spot, like a sneaky bad spot, especially once again with all the focus being on the rough place that the Pac-12 is in right now. Here is the bombshell from this Ross Dellinger article, this paragraph. A subset of 7 schools in the 14-member conference has coalesced over what many of them describe as an untenable situation. Officials from the 7 schools, led by Florida State and Clemson, have met a handful of times over the past several months with their lawyers examining the grant of rights to determine just how unbreakable it is. That is not great news if you are an ACC fan. That is not great news if you are like a Pitt, Louisville, Wake Forest, Boston College fan, one of the schools that was not in the 7. What are the 7, you ask? We will interrupt this Sports Illustrated story to bring you reporting from Brett McMurphy, who dropped this on Twitter after that story came out. He said these are the Magnificent 7, as he's calling them. Clemson, Florida State, Miami, North Carolina, NC State, Virginia, and Virginia Tech. Interesting to me to see NC State and Virginia Tech included in there. There was a lot of speculation over who those other 2 schools would be. But Virginia Tech, pretty large enrollment, close to 30,000 enrollment, fairly close to Washington, D.C. I've been told by a number of people on Twitter after questioning it a little bit that Virginia Tech has a pretty large alumni base in some big areas and is in a fairly talent-rich area itself. So I guess that squashes some of why Virginia Tech is included in there, and they could be headed for the SEC or Big Ten if something were to happen. More from Ross Dellinger's article. Per the grant of rights, each ACC school gives ownership of its broadcasting rights to the league in a deal with ESPN that runs through 2036. If a school breaks the deal, the ACC will continue to own the TV rights of any of that school's home games, according to the contract. So the ACC's options are quite limited. And here are the 3 prongs that are laid out by Dellinger as far as like what potential options could be here, none of which seem to be very good for these ACC schools right now. One would be seek additional revenue from ESPN. Dellinger says this is a long shot given the network's current situation. ESPN, in the midst of a wave of personnel cuts, is also negotiating deals with UFC, WWE, the NBA, and the Pac-12. Well, Commissioner Jim Phillips and a few ACC presidents met recently with the network over the issue. No significant cash infusion appears imminent. Of course, why would ESPN be really motivated to make this happen right now? They're simply not going to be. That feels to me like a virtual non-starter. Number 2 here is secede from the league. Says some of the schools, possibly the most frustrated lot, such as Florida State and Clemson, could just pay the $120 million exit fee and hope they can break a grant of rights agreement that most attorneys say is airtight. That then leaves a very big question, where do they go? The SEC and Big Ten seem quite comfortable with their current membership, but potential Western realignment could trigger them to expand more. Third option here, this is interesting, create another league. Dellinger says if the 7 agree to dissolve the current grant of rights agreement, and in parentheses, we don't know yet if this is a possibility, they may add a couple more schools and begin their own association in hopes of it being more lucrative. This comes with its own issues, of course. You need a broadcast partner or private equity to fund such an endeavor. And as one official asks, will it really be that much more lucrative? That was the part I would bring up there. I don't know how that would really solve your problem and be more lucrative. If you get up to like 10 teams to have enough inventory for a TV deal there, is it really going to be that much more money when you divide it? No, the move is going to be those schools trying to find their way into the Big Ten or the SEC, but that seems potentially impossible here unless they can somehow legal loophole their way out of the grant of rights. And as the story notes, basically, there are no easy answers. Of course, it goes on to say one of the things that they're trying to push this week at the meetings is unequal revenue sharing, but we shared the war chant story, and it was reiterated again by both The Athletic and Sports Illustrated today. Sounds like the max that could really help out these schools like Florida State, Clemson, etc. is $5 million per year, and that's if they're performing at the highest level. That's not going to make up that $30 million gap that they are trying to make up. So this feels like just a little nudge in that direction, and I said the other day, like sort of laying the groundwork for the case of them leaving. This may be step one to try and bully people around a little bit. A little bit more from the article from Ross Dellinger. He says, however, any change in the distribution model falls short of significantly closing the gap. All right, here it is. In the most successful year under a merit-based model, a school might receive an extra $5 million. An unequal distribution model can also impact the culture of a conference. It can sow divisiveness within a league, says one athletic director from outside the ACC. Quote, it won't stop there. This will be the beginning of the end. And I would agree with that. Look, the Big 12 knows all about that, right? You have one school throwing its weight around, getting preferential treatment like Texas did with the Longhorn Network. There's a lot of resentment throughout the league, and that does not set you on a foundation for stability and success over the long haul. So yeah, if the ACC were to go to unequal revenue sharing, I do agree that would be the beginning of the end in some form. It really already feels like we're honestly kind of at that point for the ACC. It's just a matter of when, not if, but that when is a huge, huge question because of all the money that's going to be involved and the legalities of all of this. It is messy, man. It is very, very messy. And if you thought that was messy, how about these tweets that we got as far as like live on the scene from the meetings that were going on Monday? Brett McMurphy tweeted this. He says, ACC athletic directors emerged from a 4-hour meeting with Commissioner Jim Phillips just now in Amelia Island and said they're not allowed to talk to media today. And Brett McMurphy even threw out the eyeball emoji. So a 4-hour-long meeting with Jim Phillips right on the heels of these reports. We don't know if Jim Phillips or anybody else in the ACC was aware that these 7 schools were meeting among each other to discuss this grant of rights and the exit fee and all that. They have a 4-hour meeting today and say they're not allowed to talk to media. Brandon Marcello, another national guy on the college football scene with 24/7, he said this: the ACC's athletic directors just left their first meeting since Brett McMurphy's report on the 7. Heads were down as they sped past the media contingent without talking. Their meeting went 66 minutes longer than scheduled. So that's a little extra context. I mean, 4 hours seemed very long, but not only was it 4 hours, that was over an hour longer than it was supposed to be. So this tells you what's going on in that room, I'm sure, is pretty intense right now. And all of a sudden, the spotlight is going to start being focused on the ACC here. There's been so much on the Pac-12 and the Big 12, but that is small potatoes compared to entities like Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and North Carolina being out there on the realignment chopping block and being available for the SEC and the Big Ten. And on that front, there was a very interesting quote from a Big Ten source in the Athletic article. From the Athletic and Nicole Auerbach's story, a Big Ten source said that person was particularly interested in Virginia and North Carolina as new states and or markets for the Big Ten to extend down the East Coast. The Big Ten source believes expansion out east makes far more sense than expanding into the Pacific Northwest, which has not had nearly enough support internally or among the league's media partners since the idea was first broached. Now that's very interesting. All that talk about Oregon, Washington, Oregon, Washington, Oregon, Washington, and here's somebody inside the Big Ten saying like, hey, actually, if we could expand east, that would make a lot more sense. And if you're just thinking about pure reach, one side of the country to the other, which is kind of what Brett Yormark's going for in the Big 12 right now, right? That would be the better way to expand. I also think a part of the Virginia Tech NC State thing is that, hey, if Virginia and North Carolina are going to go to one conference, Virginia Tech and NC State, that could be a way for the other conference, whether it's SEC or Big Ten, to get into new territory, get into new big, heavily populated states. I think that's some of the logic there. So basically what we have here is just a wildly fascinating situation unfolding. and one that may take some of the spotlight away from all this Big 12, Pac-12 infighting that we have had here. So, hey, let me know in the comments what you think. What do you think of all this? Overblown? Do you think this is going to happen soon? Do you agree, disagree, whatever it might be? Let me know in the comments. Like the video. I would appreciate that. All that stuff really helps. Great way to support the channel. You can also support the channel on Venmo. It is John-Kurtz-4 if you would like to do that. And be on the lookout for live shows. If you guys have made it this far, I'll drop this in. I don't think that I'll be able to do a live show on Wednesday this week. It's probably going to have to be Thursday. But I am determined to get something in for you in the middle of the week with everything that is going on. And the live shows are a blast if you have not been there yet. Lots of people, hundreds of people hanging out and talking conference realignment and college football. Thank you guys for being here. Appreciate you. Spread the word with this video. Spread the word about the channel, and I will talk to you all soon. Thanks.